Okay, we're down to the bare bones. You must all have finished lab 6. Yeah? Okay. All right. So what's happening? Okay, lab 6 is due tomorrow, but that's kind of irrelevant for you. What else is happening? The end of the quarter is near. Okay, so today we're going to finish up talking about CMOS, and we will talk about how to design how a flip-flop is actually built from logic gates on Friday. So we just 7 weeks ago, we just threw a D flip-flop up on the screen and said, here's a D flip-flop. Go off and use it, but we never explained how it actually is constructed and how it actually works and where the timing parameters come from, the setup time and the hold time. So we'll do that on Friday. We'll fill that hole on Friday. Let me make sure I have this on. I do. Okay. There's one more homework. As I mentioned, I will get it up tomorrow, and it will be due next Friday evening, the usual time. Our final is Monday at 8 a.m. Any questions before we launch into CMOS again?
The homework probably due at like 10 p.m. as usual.
Yeah, it'll be the same as usual. So by now you know I make it due in Canvas at 10 p.m., but GradeScope stays open longer. Okay, all right, let's go back to CMOS. Okay, so last time, just a really quick recap. Last time we talked about voltage and current. Okay, so this is how most of our computing hardware is realized these days, with miniaturized electronics, and there are 2 laws that you need to know about, and then we talked about the fact that our devices are communicating ones and zeros by supplying a voltage in a range. So in this range we would call that a 1, this range is 0, and of course the receiving range should be a little bit wider than the sending range so that you have room for noise. And then we introduced MOSFETs, which are field effective transistors, and this is the symbol for an NMOS, and this we can think of as operating as a switch, and basically when we apply a high voltage to the gate here, then it closes the switch, allowing electrons to flow, and when it's not high, when it's low, then this is an open switch, and very little goes through. Okay, and now we showed how we could build a inverter with an NMOS. The only problem was we needed a little magic to make it actually pull up the output when the input was 0, because when the input voltage is 0, this NMOS transistor is off, and we would like the output to be high for 1, right? And an inverter is supposed to convert 0 to 1 and 1 to 0. The 1 to 0 is easy. The NMOS transistor does that for us. Okay. PMOS does just the opposite. PMOS, and this bubble is part of the PMOS symbol. You can't slide it around like we did in the logic networks. Gotta leave it there. It's part of the transistor. It operates in the opposite way. Basically, when the gate voltage is low, then you have a closed switch, and when the gate voltage is high, then you have an open switch. Okay, and by using both types, we obtain complementary logic, otherwise known as CMOS. And basically when x is 0, This one is on, this one's off, and we are pulling up the output. And when this one is 1, this one is off, this one is on, and we are pulling down the output. So a 1 maps to 0, a 0 corresponds to 1, which is what we want from our inverters. And then from there we built a NAND gate. Again, we want the output to be low when both x and y are 1. Right? The NAND gate is the complement of the AND, so it's 0 only when both inputs are 1. And we built an OR gate. Again, and notice that how they kind of switched. Here we have parallel connections. Here we have them in series. And here's the opposite. And then we talked about, well, let's say we were implementing a Boolean function. You did that by drawing a logic network. So you might have drawn this logic network where you directly implemented all of the operations you see in this expression. So you would have complemented A, complemented B, complemented C, complemented D. Then you would have ORed B naught and C naught. You would have ANDed that with D naught, and then ORed it with A naught. That's the direct correspondence to that expression, right? But then we could, in fact, slide those bubbles around. And if we slide those bubbles around, this will become a NAND gate. We can put 2 inverters here, and then slide this inverter here, and then this one will become a NAND gate. And if you count the number of transistors for each of these gates individually, we came up with 26, whereas we actually improved it to 14 by moving the inversions around. Right? An AND gate is actually more expensive than a NAND gate. Right? The NAND gate is 4, and AND gate's going to be 6 because it's an AND gate with an inverter. Okay. And then we talked about, in general, how do we do this? Can we just build directly a CMOS gate that pulls out the output, pulls up the output when we want F to be 1, and pulls down the output when we want F to be 0? And basically what we're doing then is we're building this type of gate. We have 2 sections. We have a pull-up network, and this has to be made of PMOS. Can't use NMOS up here because you're trying to pull up the output, and PMOS can handle that. NMOS can't. NMOS is not good at conducting 1. It's good at conducting 0, which is why we use NMOS for the pull-down. Okay, so you can't just flip these 2 and put your PMOS down here in MOS. Can't do that. Okay, so in general, if we want a particular function, what we want to do is build a network that's going to connect to VDD when we want the output to be 1, and it's going to connect to 0. The pull-down network is going to connect when we want F to be 0. And we would insist that both of these not be on at the same time, because if they were both conducting, then we would have a path. We'd have a short power ground, which is not a good idea. And the other thing that's also important is we would like one of them to be on it. And that's so F actually is either pulled up or pulled down. It's not in between. Because in between might not be considered a 0 or a 1. We want this to actually be 0 or 1 voltage. Yeah. Okay, so how do we do that? We did this. Ignore the pink for the moment. That was a revision we did right at the end. We took our expression, and the original expression is pretty simple to create the pull-up network with. Basically, wherever you have an OR, you want to provide paths in parallel, and whenever you have an AND, you want to provide paths in series because you need both parts to be conducting. Right? Now, because these are PMOS, they are on when the gate input is low. So if you have an inverter here, you're very happy because that means you can just connect A directly, because this will conduct when A bar is 1. or A is 0. Okay, all right, so we did that. For the pull down, what we did is, well, when is this function supposed to be 0? Well, when its complement is 1. So we complemented it, and we came up with this expression, and we built this out of NMOS. Now here we use the variables directly. I don't need, not inverting them, right? Okay, and then I think someone asked, well, what if one of these didn't have an inverter? So we looked at the case where A did not have a complement over here. So let's pretend this, so we x'd out the complement here. And if that's the case, we would have needed to feed A bar to this PMOS and A bar to this NMOS. And to do that, we built an inverter. Okay, so that's what we did last time. And let's move on from there, unless there are questions. No. Okay. So, oh, I just happen to have a gate here. Where did that come from? Okay, so what function does this gate, what Boolean function does this gate attempt to implement? And is it a sound gate? No. Okay. All right. So let's try to figure this out. The first thing to do is let's get an expression for when the pull-up network is conducting. Okay. So when is there a connection from VDD to F? Into.
Ask that again and maybe I can answer it. Sorry, just walked in.
Yeah, we noticed.
Sorry.
What expression evaluates to 1 when there's a connection through these two transistors? Yeah.
Is this A and B or C and D?
You think so? So both A and B, and then so, or C and D?
Yeah.
Wait, you have a different take?
Well, the same thing, but you just need to invert all the impacts.
Okay, remember these conduct when they're 0. So those are, so we need A to be 0 and B to be 0, or C to be 0 and D to be 0. Right, these are PMOS. They're only going to be on if their gate input is low. Okay. All right, what about the pull down? When is it, when do I have a connection from F to ground? Yes.
Please put parentheses.
Okay. Just like Vivado, if you don't specify, I will do it the wrong way. Okay, all right. So now the question is, are these actual complements of each other? So, well,
K-Math time.
oh, yes. Usually there's a groan at this point, but
I love K-Maths. And I'm not sure how many other people are actually here. Those of you who are here, thank you. We're the part of the class.
you're the peanut gallery. Okay.
I had to give up my seat in the lab. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get back in today.
Okay, all right. So where is the pull-up conducting? Let's see. So these are nice sum of products, right? So the sum of products actually corresponds to this product term actually corresponds to a rectangle, and it corresponds to the rectangle in B, which is this column, right? So our function is going to be 1. It's going to be pulled up in those 4 cells. If A and B are both 0, we're going to pull up. All right. And what about CD?
It's that top.
The top row. Okay. So we're going to pull it up twice here. But they're both going to be on, but that's okay. No problem. Okay. So here, let's write this one out as a sum of products. Okay, so where is BC?
That's that bottom middle 4.
Okay, so these four, right?
Yes.
So we're going to get a 0. We're going to get a connection to ground there. Okay, AD.
Is the right middle 2 by 2.
Okay. All right, and AC.
Is that bottom right?
These four, right? Oh, wait. What happened? Okay, so there is the pull up and pull down. Neither are connected here. So we have a floating, what we call floating output. Floating output when, no, it isn't. When, let's see, A, B, C, D, let's see, A is 0, B is 1, C is 0, and D is 1. Okay, so for this particular value, so that's not good. Okay. Now, how to fix it depends on the original intention, and I have no idea what that was. You have to go ask the designer what they meant to do. Okay, now there is a possibility that they promised never, ever, ever to supply this value, and if you trust them, it's okay. But if it happens, you might regret it. Okay, what about this one? What's my pull-up? Yes.
Not C or not A and not B.
Okay. And the pull down. Yes? Darn. Okay. All right. So let's see if.
That adversarial.
Oh.
Although I guess it's fun.
Okay. Okay. So where are we pulling up? Let's see. When C is 0, so that's up here. And when both A and B are 0, so that's here. And let's rewrite this as BC plus AB so that I have product terms and I can locate the cells, corresponding cells easier. So BC, which is here, and AB, oh, that's not good. What was that? All right, so we have a potential short here, right?
Yeah.
Our pull up and pull down are both on. So this is not good. Okay. So this is also an ill-formed gate that we would not want to use. Okay, I have one more. Okay, so this one's a little bit more complicated.
Oh boy.
X, Y, Z. It still only has 3 variables.
That's just a not gate from the Z.
Is it?
Yes, you showed us last lecture when I asked.
All right. So if this is Z, we have PMOS here and NMOS here, right? And controlled by Z. And so this gives us Z bar here. If this is high, this one's going to be low. And if this one's low, this one will be high.
Yay.
All right, so what's our pull-up function now?
Okay, there's X, Y, and Z. So that is
Anybody?
X and Z. Wait, not X and not Z. Or
Okay, so you did the easy part. That's easy. Now this other part here, okay?
not Y and Z or not X in parentheses.
Okay. All right. Everybody agree? Okay. And here, I'll just write this out again as a, sum of products. Okay, what about a pull down? Yes?
Not Z or Y.
Not Z or Y.
Put that in parentheses. And another set of parentheses. X or Z and Y.
Okay. Everybody see that? Right? This gate here now is controlled by Z bar, so that's why we have a Z bar here. Okay, so fortunately we only have 3 variables, so I only need a 3 variable K-map. All right, so we are pulled up at X bar, Z bar, which is here. Y bar, Z, which is here and here. And Y bar, X bar, which is here, here. Okay. And, oh, okay. This is, I could write this out as a sum of products. Can we do that? Or you want me to just leave it as a product of sums?
Actually, POS is nice for getting zeros. So.
All right, we'll write this out as a product of sums. So this becomes X plus Y, X plus Z. So this is going to be 0 if X okay. So this is when it's not connecting, right? So this is really confusing. We want to actually know when it evaluates to 1.
Well, you could just write in the ones where the POS would give us 0, right?
Yeah, but in order to get a 1, I need all 3 terms to be 1 simultaneously, right? Which is why the product of sums works here. Knowing where this function is 0 doesn't help me. I want to know where it's 1. Of course, if I figured out where it was 0, then we could do it that way. You want to do that? All right, let's.
You do it like you would do a normal POS, and then you flip it in your head as you write it down, and then you're only.
And I'm
If you can track the
I think this is a little bit easier. Okay, so X Z bar, this one's going to go away because I have a Z bar and a Z, and then I have X Y, and I have Y Z. Okay?
Fine, make your job reasonable.
Okay, so this is going to be 1 when X is 1 and Z is 0, which is these 2 cells. So I'm going to get a 0 here. Now, is that confusing or what? Okay, so the way you have to think about this is we want to know when this connects, and when this connects, when this when this expression evaluates to 1, is when you're going to get a 0. So be careful with that. If you want, you can take the complement. That will work, and then put in the zeros, but that's just about as simple as my multiplying it out and getting a sum of products. Okay, X, Y, which is here and here, and Y, Z. Ooh, looks like we have a sound gate, right? No cell has 2 values, and every cell, every input has a value. Okay, so this is a complementary. The C stands for complementary. The pull-up and the pull-down network are complements of each other. Okay. Is this a good gate, though? No. Why not? What's wrong with it, Caitlin?
Well, it handles us kind of doesn't need
Okay.
Like looking at the logic expression, if you're going to pull up x bar z bar or y bar z or y bar x bar, you can just simply simplify that and get rid of one.
Okay. How would I simplify that? I mean, basically what we did here is we added this one, xz bar, and we added y bar z. We added this one, and then we added this one. Is one of them not necessary? Does this awaken memories? Okay, so you can use your K-maps to come up with your minimum sum of products expressions will get you the minimum number of transistors. Each literal is a transistor. Okay, so if I minimize this, what expression do I get?
X not Z or Y Z.
For the pull-up.
X bar z. Well, this is the. Oh, I'm doing that. Sorry. So this is x bar z bar plus y bar z.
Yes.
I don't need this one at all. Okay, so now let's see, how many transistors did I have? I have 5 here. Is that right? Okay, 5, and here I had 5, so that's 10 plus the 2 inverters, 12 transistors here. I'm still going to need a Z. All right, so let's draw. Okay, so the function I'm trying to implement now is this one. Okay, so this doesn't look too bad. See, I have 2 branches. I need X and Z, and I'm going to put them over here. Okay, so these are PMOS, so I get to complement the input. It helps to write the right variable name, though. Z, okay. All right, so that's my X bar, Z bar. Y bar, Z, okay, so this one's easy. But this one, I have a slight problem in that I need a Z bar here. Right, because this wants to be on when Z is 1. So I need to complement this because it's going to be on when the gate is actually 0. Gate input is 0. Okay, what about the pull down? Let's see. This was my pull down expression, right? Again, I have the same thing. I have an extra. So I could get rid of this one. Okay, so my pull down expression is going to be, this is pull up, and the pull down will be X Z bar plus Y Z. Okay. So these have to be NMOS. Okay, so I'm going to need Z bar here. And then this one can be, X and Y and Z and ground and F. And now I need my Z bar. I need to supply Z bar. So I'm going to put in an inverter. Okay, I'm going to put that. We're going to go around this expression. Okay, and now I can connect to there. Okay. So we tend to put a little dot where wires connect. If you see two wires that just go like that, the assumption is that they aren't connecting. And that's why we try to offset these. So there's no mistaking that, for example, if these two had aligned up, you would have wondered, did it go through? Of course, the little dot should have been a tip-off that it doesn't. Okay, any questions on it? Okay, so there'll be some of these to work out on homework 6. So basically, we're building our logic gates out of switches. And there are all sorts of different technologies that have basically switches. And you can construct the 3 basic gates pretty much in any technology. Quantum computing is a little different. Okay. All right. So sometimes we actually can do better if we take advantage of the underlying technology. Okay, so you may basically so far we have produced gates that output zeros and ones and that interact with each other just by sending zeros and ones. But there are ways to produce logic operations without breaking them down into the individual 3 gates. An example of that is the XOR. But let me talk about something called that you may have heard of before. This symbol represents a transmission gate. And a transmission gate is basically a PMOS inverter, PMOS transistor in parallel with an NMOS. Okay, so we haven't done that before, right? Before there was always a pull-up network and a pull-down network. Now we just took these 2 transistors and put them in parallel to each other. Now, a PMOS transistor conducts 1 well, and an NMOS transistor conducts 0 well. So if they're both on, you can conduct either 0 or 1 on. It's like, don't have to worry. We can use this to pull up or we can use it to pull down. One of the 2 will do the job. Right? And so this is really almost you can think of this as a switch. So how do we use this? Well, let's say that we want to build a MUX. Remember, I think we did talk about MUXes back then. Remember, this is input 0, input 1, and this is the selector. Right? And we want to build a MUX out of this. So the way we did this is we did this with logic gates, right? We said, okay, I don't really care whether it's the same signal coming in and out. I just care that the logic value be correct on the output. And so we did something like this, I think. We let S select either I0 or I1, and then only one of these will be non-zero, and then we ORed them together, right? And then we actually made this a little better by turning these all into 3 nands. And so we ended up with a total of 12 transistors, right? We can turn these into NAND gates. Okay, But instead of thinking this in terms of logic, let's think of this actually as sending the signal through that we receive, sending I0 through. So what we want is, here's I0. We want to have a switch controlled by S. Basically, when S is 0, we want this to close. We want to have another switch controlled by S, and we want to connect to O. So one of these is going to go through. And that's what our transmission gate will let us do. Because what I can do now is I can take two transmission gates, okay. So this one will be the switch for I0, and I'm going to connect I0 to here, and I'm going to have another one to send I1 through, and then I'm going to connect both sides. Now, we've never done that, connected two outputs together. Right? Vivado will not let you do that. And that's because the outputs in the gates in Vivado are either being pulled down or pulled up. But here, when this is off, it's just floating. Only one of these is closed. Always one of these is closed. So we don't have an issue with a short. Okay, so this is I1. Okay, so now I want this one to be on when S is 0. So I think what I'm going to do here is, well, I'm going to connect S to that one, and then I need an inverter for the other side. Hey, and that's just what I need for the bottom one, the other way. Right, so when S is 0, this is off, because this is PMOS, and this is NMOS, and this one's on. And when S is 1, we have the reverse. This one's on, and this one's off. Okay, so this is essentially what we're implementing. Okay, how many transistors here? 6, right? 2 plus 2 plus 2. Here we had 12. Actually, I should count an extra 2 for inverting that input, if you like. So that's 14. Now, there's one very key difference here between these two circuits, and that is this is a NAND gate, which means that this output is actually being pulled up through two transistors or being pulled down through the two transistors. It doesn't matter what happened before. However, here, whatever signal comes through here, it may have had, a long journey, and now you're not going to it's just going to go through the transistors. It's not going to get connected to either power or ground through transistors. Okay, so this could possibly not have sufficient strength. And so you need to be a little bit careful when you use these things. You can't just connect a bunch of transition gates in sequence. Okay.
Man, that would be such a sad story for most of my Vivado code, which involves putting muxes in sequence.
Well, in Vivado, you're using zeros and ones. You're not doing this. In fact, I can tell you a story from when the Xilinx chips did do things like that and why they stopped doing it. Okay. So let's say you want an apples and apples comparison. Then basically what you would do is you would just put two inverters here. And so now we have 4. So it's 14 versus 10. Still, this is better. Okay, so you can always just put two inverters. And sometimes in your circuit, you'll see this. And you'll say, why is that there? What does it do? So it may, in fact, have some use in I guess, conditioning the signal, improving its strength. In a schematic that really has no resistors, capacitors, or other types of things, a symbol like this is just a way of renaming the two wires. So sometimes you've drawn a diagram and you have a net named A, and you have another net named Alfred, and you would like to connect A to Alfred. Your schematic was going to complain, and so you can't connect two separate nets. Okay, and so this allows you to essentially connect A to Alfred. So it's simply for that purpose. Okay. All right. So we can make logic out of transmission gates, and there's other things, other kinds of networks that you can build out of transistors to do different logic functions, which is not the subject of this class, fortunately. Okay. But I do want to talk about one more thing as far as using transmission gates. If I can get this back. Okay. Okay. So you may have heard the terminology tri-state or tri-state output. Yes. Yes. Actually, the first 3 pages are actually there. They're blank though. But I will scan them afterwards. Put them up there. Okay. So here used to have gates having either output 0 or 1, but there's a third possibility. Remember that blue? Remember that blue in the simulator?
Z.
Yeah, Z, exactly. So that means you can call that floating or high impedance. It means nothing is driving that wire. There is nothing pulling it up or down. Okay, so a tri-state buffer is basically a little device that lets you shut off the input or pass it through as you desire. So this is this particular tri-state buffer is active when E is 1. When E is 1, then whatever X is, that's what F is. But when E is 0, the output F is not being driven by anything, at least not here. If you connect F's to something else, then yes. Okay. And this is called high impedance value. And of course, in Vivado, you cause this by just not specifying a value for a net, right? But you can do this intentionally, and there are reasons why this is useful. All right, so how do we build this? Well, we build it by using our transmission gate, right? The NMOS and the PMOS transistors in series form a transmission gate. So in parallel, form a transmission gate. And E basically determines whether they are both on or both off. Right? If E is 0, then this is 1, this is 0, and they're off. If E is 1, then this is 0, and this is 1, and they're both on. And we are repowering it here before we're sending it through. There, of course, are 4 different flavors of tri-state buffers, and it's usually important to know which one you have. The very first Xilinx libraries had a symbol that looked exactly like this, but the enable was actually active low. And that really confused people. And it was a problem. Okay, so, but generally, if it's active low, we'll put a bubble there to indicate that this is enabled when E is 0. So in this case, when E is 1, you have high impedance, otherwise you send through F. Right, and all we did is move the inverter from one side to the other. To do that, you can have inverting tri-state buffers where the output is not X but X bar. That's useful too. Then you don't have to have these two inverters here, and if you stage these, you save a bunch. Okay, so where do these come in handy? Do you remember something that you built that looks a little bit like this? I believe it is in every single lab since lab 3. Your selector, right?
That was lab 2.
No, I think you just had two digits in lab 2.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Lab 2, you were just picking between 2. Okay. But you could have used it. You could have done the same thing. Okay, so these are expensive. These, you have four input muxes, right? So can we do it a little bit cheaper? And the answer is yes, if I use tri-state buffers. So the idea is we want to send either the first 4 bits of A, or the second 4 bits, or the third 4 bits, or the fourth 4 bits. And we can feed these to tri-state buffers whose outputs are wired together. But we have to promise not to turn more than one of them on at a time. So only one column is allowed to be enabled. And we kind of force this by controlling that, right? So basically this one only on when we have 0, 0, and this one at 1, 0, this one at 0, 1, and this one at 1, 1. Okay? And this is much cheaper way of implementing buses or selection buses than using multiplexers. Right? There are other kinds of devices. We can do a wired OR, wired AND, something called an open collector. All of these nice terms that you might encounter in your E courses. Okay. All right. The only problem is you need to be extremely careful here that you don't turn one of these on, more than one of these on. Because otherwise you could have what's called a drive fight. Okay, so let's look at what's going on here. We have 2 tri-state buffers. One of them has input 0, the other one has input 1, and we've wired their outputs together, and they're both on. Well, what does that mean? If we look down inside, right inside this one, we have an inverter and a transmission gate, an inverter and a transmission gate, and they're both on. And so one of them sending a 0. Sorry, one of them sending a 1 through. And so when we turn on the tri-state buffers, they're going to send the values out. And, oh no, sorry, it's the only GIF Microsoft had.
The energy is quite good, honestly.
Okay, so you don't want to do this, right? And in fact, it used to be that the first Xilinx chips back in the 90s, I know that's probably before you guys were born, had tri-state buffers along every row. And you would decide whether you wanted to use them or not. And it was up to you to make sure you did not do this. And of course, what would happen is the user would make a mistake, right? You guys never make mistakes. The first time you download it works perfectly, right? And then the chip would heat up, and it would destroy it. Or some part of it. And then the user would say, "You sold me a bad chip." Okay, now, who knows, right? So they don't do this anymore. No tri-state buffers, right? It's actually, it may look like a tri-state buffer on the schematic, but it's actually a MUX. Okay, because this is the sort of thing you run into. If you have user error that you cannot prove, then you're in trouble. And this could, in fact, destroy part. It also raised interesting possibility is that somebody could send you a malicious bit file. They could say, okay, download my bit file. And it starts heating up in it. It's not going to blow up the board, but you'll heat it up and it won't work. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay, so we only touched, there's a myriad ways that you can build different logic functions directly from transistors other than just and, or, and not. I think there was a talk this morning where they were talking about doing machine language, and they had mem resistors, which are resistors you can program to be certain strengths, and you can do multiplication by applying a voltage and then measuring the current, basically using Ohm's law, right? Because V equals IR. So you know R, you know V, you can figure out I. You can measure I, and you've done multiplication. A lot of clever things like that. Okay, any questions? All right, so I guess that's it for today. We will talk about how to build flip-flops. You will actually be building a flip-flop next week out of gates, out of real discrete parts.